Hello and welcome back to the Audible Finish, a weekly show discussing the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me as always is my esteemed co-host, Thanasu. In this week's episode, we review AEW's WrestleDream event, which was stolen not by Bryan Danielson and Zack Sabre Jr., but rather the shock debut of the rated R superstar Adam Copeland FKA Edge. Edge is all elite, Thanasu. We'll get into our thoughts on that as well as the rest of the pay-per-view very shortly. But to let you know what's going to happen later on in the show, we're also going to look into what happened over on WWE, including a stellar Intercontinental Championship match between Gunther and Tommaso Ciampa that was made better by the surprise return of Johnny Gargano. It looks like we're getting finally a DIY reunion. If you are enjoying the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. Now, before we get into WrestleDream, Thanasi, do you want to give us a quick recap of what happened over on Collision?
Certainly. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here and doing a quick recap of Collision because we've got lots of WrestleDream stuff to go through. So the opening contest of the night was Juice Robinson versus Andrade El Idolo. Andrade hit the reverse elbow and he got a 2.99, but it was the hammerlock DDT that manages to get the win for him. Next up, Toni Storm, starring in Portrait of a Star. She's as unstable as ever, but she's keeping that gimmick going really strongly. The Kingdom took on the Best Friends, and I just want to make a note of what happened in this match, where Beretta delivered a Death Valley driver. Mike Bennett was on the receiving end of this one, and it was onto the steel steps, no less. And then he cops a Shining Wizard Doomsday device instead of the clothesline. And then the boys deliver tandem pile drivers for a 2 count as Bennett grabs the rope. Chuck Taylor, in the end, cops 2 low blows and an assisted pile driver by the members of the Kingdom for the 3 count. Julia Hart delivers a forward cartwheel clothesline and a moonsault to deliver the victory against Vert Vixen. Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega team up against the Gates of Agony, and basically the story is that the faces are trying to determine if they can coexist as a tag team. And in the finish, Kenny hits a tope as Y2J gets the walls in, and they win via submission. They cut a promo afterwards where they're talking smack about their opponents at WrestleDream, and there's a nice technique that I liked where Kenny made a joke after mentioning Takeshita and Ospreay, so that when Jericho mentioned the name of Sammy Guevara, it immediately evoked boos from the crowd. So I thought that was really clever of them. The Righteous defeated Jobbers with an assisted step-up bulldog and then cut a promo calling MJF the devil and Adam Cole a liar. And they ended up the segment with a modified concerto where instead of the steel chair being underneath the head, they put a wooden 2x4 underneath the legs of the Jobbers and then smacked it with a chair. In the main event of the evening, we had an 8-man tag. Aussie Open teamed up with Ricky Starks and Big Bill to take on Bryan Danielson, FTR, and Wheeler Yuta. Not too much in this match. There was a very traditional tag team style where they're saving Daniel Bryanson for the big pop. He doesn't actually get to tag in for a little while. Wheeler and Dax both have moments of getting isolated. It's simple storytelling, right? But eventually Bryan does tag in with a massive Washington pop, unloads with chops, kicks, a missile drop kick. He falls victim to the Ricky Starks and Big Bill outnumbering him. And then we have the trophy scuffle, like with all the moves getting in, like everyone exchanging moves and grappling. That included the faces hitting quadruple yes kicks. That was the awesome spot. But then the finish of the match, Ricky Starks and Big Bill hit a chokeslam spear combo on Dax, and then Cash breaks it up at 3.01. So he breaks it up after the count is made. Eventually, pandemonium ensues on the outside, and then Danielson and Sabre go face to face, and they exchange some Japanese slaps to try to get a scuffle in there, but it's just a tease because we're going to see it properly at WrestleDream, which is what we're about to discuss now, Dimitri.
Absolutely. Well, let's not dilly-dally any longer. Let's get straight into WrestleDream. And to start off, we had MJF versus The Righteous for the ROH World Tag Team Championships. And I said we had plenty of speculation as to what maybe could have happened here creatively, storyline-wise. What actually played out?
Well, MJF, first of all, opened the night with a promo where he denied that he was the one behind the Jay White attack. As you remember, there was the person with the devil mask that looked at the camera as we went off Dynamite. But I just want to point out this detail here. The Righteous spent their time in the heel corner. Ordinarily, it's correct, but I believe the right thing to do is when it's a handicap match, whether it's a face or a heel, you're supposed to go into the babyface corner because visually it's more accessible. So maybe they're still sanding out the rough edges there. In this match, we had a powerbomb and swanton bomb combo by the heels that they called Death from Above, and it ended up in a 2 count. They hit a spin out STO and an assisted step up bulldog also for 2. And this is where they tried to impale the legs of MJF, pardon me, between the wooden 2x4 and the concerto strike. But Max grabs Vincent's balls until the ref quells Dutch's distraction to avoid certain doom. And the story of this match basically is MJF's struggle to body slam Dutch. And after 3 attempts, he does it. And he mentioned it in the media scrum later that it might have seemed gimmicky, but this was like old school traditional wrestling, and the crowd was really hot for it. He threw the bigger man and then the smaller man into the corner, delivered the kangaroo kick, also getting a big pop. Dutch eats a heat seeker and a dirty cover with the legs on the ropes for the big victory. So that was that match. It was a nice, simple way to open up. I mean, are we using our world champion the right way? Question marks, but he did very well. Did very well in that spot.
That he did, and it's nice to see him get the win, I guess. And I've been joking about it, but like I think it's fair to say like he is very much in his John Cena Superman phase, isn't he?
He's in his basically invincibility phase at the moment because you can't boo the man. He's our champion. He's our scumbag, right? So you just can't bring yourself to hate him.
Absolutely not. And let's now transition to the next match of the night, which was Eddie Kingston versus Katsuyori Shibata for the NJPW Openweight Championship and the ROH World Championship. Thanassia, do you want to take us through what happened in this one as well?
I'm going to cover this one as well. So the boys exchanged chops, some very, very stiff chops at that. And then Shibata's submissions start getting locked in. So that includes some arm bars, Indian deathlock, moves of that ilk. Shibata was really in control using the Japanese strong style in this match. Eddie's side suplex attempt is met with an STO, flatliner, and some domination with some Western style wrestling as well from Shibata. Eddie comes back, however, with a Northern Lights bomb, the discus chops, and a stiff power bomb, which enables him to, a little bit out of nowhere, in my view, retain the gold. The boys observe the code of honor. They shake hands afterwards, and Eddie graciously motions towards the cameras to cut his music so that Shibata can get a moment in homage of Antonio Inoki. So it was a lovely gesture from the guys there. It was a nice short match, I would say. That's how I would put this one.
Yeah, and just as a bit of a spoiler, that I felt like that was a bit of a running theme for some of these matches, but all in all, it was still a good show. Let's now go into the next match, which was Julia Hart versus Chris Statlander for the AEW TBS Championship. And this was a solid bout for the two competitors. I think it's worth noting that Julia Hart came in with a winning streak, and I believe the last time she lost a match was against Chris Statlander. So I think from that angle, if that is true, I appreciate that from a storytelling perspective and adding that extra layer of intrigue into this match where it's because this was kind of a test of is Julia Hart ready? And the answer is no, but she's very close. And just to get into a bit of how the match closed, there was a moment where Julia Hart went up to the top rope and actually was able to throw Chris Statlander off it while still keeping her legs up there. Then she used her core strength to lift herself back up, hit Statlander with a moonsault for a 1-2, and then Statlander managed to not kick out, but get her foot on the bottom rope. Julia Hart then transitioned immediately into her heartless submission, excuse me. And Statlander, within the hold, actually managed to get up and hit her with a tombstone pile driver, and then followed it up immediately with Sunday Night Fever for the victory. Chris Statlander remains TBS champion. She still has the bragging rights over Julia Hart, but this was a good sign of development for the young starlet with the House of Black. Thanasi, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Look, I'm just really keen to see where Chris Statlander goes with this. I really don't think there's going to be a major setback for Julia Hart. She had a winning streak, yes, but we can keep growing on from this. I don't think it's a big roadblock for her.
All right, well then let's get into the next match, which was the Young Bucks versus the Guns versus the Lucha Brothers versus Orange Cassidy and Hook for a future AEW World Tag Team Championship match. Thanasi, I'm not gonna lie, I was watching this, I was enjoying it, but there was too many things happening at once for me to even comprehend taking down notes. So I just watched it, experienced it, and actually, to my surprise, the Young Bucks won. And that honestly, it did shock me a little bit, just purely based on the fact that we had FTR Young Bucks 3 not that long ago, and it feels like they're setting up for potentially the next pay-per-view down the line, or maybe even for a special Dynamite episode this year. So that is a bit of a surprise to me. Did you feel that way as well?
I did think it was weird because that being said, Nick Jackson's also the number one contender for a singles championship. So he's in the running for a singles and a doubles belt. I thought that was a little bit weird to do it at that point. I mean, look, overall, the match is when it's an 8-man tag, a 4-way tag, it's going to be a little bit disharmonious, a little bit pandemonious, and it proved to be so.
That it did, and look, we'll see how the tag scene develops from here onwards. But now let's go into the Young Bucks' very good friend, Hangman Adam Page, who had a match against a hometown hero in Swerve Strickland. Now, hometown hero for Seattle. Obviously, he's not a hero for everyone. But Thanasi, do you want to take us through this bout, which is arguably Strickland's biggest profile match yet in AEW?
Certainly was, and I think before we got into the pay-per-view, I think this one, regardless of where you put it, is the second biggest match on the card. Therefore, its right spot would have been the semi-main event. It was fifth in a match of 10, but anyway, let's just go into this match. So the crowd was, as you said, very, very hot for Swerve. Some of his offense included a second rope forearm smash to the back of the neck. Page followed it up with a step-up clothesline and even delivers a devastating powerbomb onto the barricade. Swerve responds with a flatliner, a brainbuster during some very, very fast-paced action, and he also double stomps Hangman from the top rope and gives him a really stiff running knee to the back of the neck. Hangman responds with a bloody deadeye onto the steel steps. That one looked really, really brutal to me, that spot. The crowd boos the buckshot lariat tease, which is countered with a drop toe hold and an armbar submission, which nearly dislocates Hangman's shoulder. He tops it off with this is Swerve, that is. He tops it off with a double stomp onto the apron, then a 450 splash, which to me looked like it barely connected, which ended up being for a 2 count. He locks in the Fujiwara armbar to really target that arm. Buckshot lariat doesn't get all of it because of the injury. And then Prince Nana pulls the leg onto the rope to break the cover of 2. The second buckshot lariat gets countered with a concealed strike with Prince Nana's crown. But the house call, running axe kicks, and the JML driver do prove to be the difference for the big singles win. This is Swerve Strickland's biggest win, I think, on a very, very big platform as well. I'd like to see this translate into bigger and better things, whether that's number one contenderships or some kind of a mid-card title reign. I think this is really big for him, and it shows that the company's taken it seriously.
Yeah, and look, to be honest, the only comment I had, because I actually thought this was a really good match between the two, and the only comment I had is honestly, you would know this well, given I've commented on this sort of finish many times in the past. if you're going to hit someone with a foreign object near the end of the match, and that person is going to win it, just let them win using the foreign object. Because I understand the idea of let them win with their own moves, because then you forget about that and it feels like it's a clean win. But then why introduce the foreign object in the first place? Like, if you're going to use it, make it central to whatever the finish was. Otherwise, it just feels like it came in the same way he would have used any one of his finishes, or just like a big strike. It feels like it was reduced to that level of, I'm just trying to ground him down a little bit. But like, outside of that, I thought this was a great showing. And I appreciate Adam Page, who isn't having the best year of his career, and yet he's still high profile enough that this actually felt like a big deal. So it's a good use of his time, even when he's not at the peak of his not just not popularity, but peak of his stardom within the company.
And I think potentially maybe part of that reason is just to protect him a little bit. That's why they did have the kick out there after he copped the big crown strike. I think it was Prince Nana's crown. And even though, because all the shoulder injury, the shoulder targeting, the arm targeting, that was all clean. That was all traditional wrestling. That was the only dirty moment. So maybe that was just a little bit of protection for Hangman.
Potentially. Actually, now the way you say it there, it makes it feel a little bit better in my eyes. So that's good. Talking about this stuff sometimes makes it even better for you. Hopefully that will come in handy later on when we discuss Edge in AEW, because I do have some thoughts on that.
We'll get to that.
But before that, let's talk about the next match of the night, which was Ricky Starks versus Wheeler Yuta. I don't have many comments for this. Actually, one of the notes I took down is TV match. So like, it wasn't that these two were bad. It's just that it felt very much like this is something that should be on Collision or Dynamite to elevate Ricky Starks' rise, or just to give Wheeler Yuta some good TV time in singles action. I noted down Moxley on commentary. Here, it didn't make as much interest to me, but I actually found him quite interesting on commentary for the next match, which we'll get into soon. And he won with the spear, and I think the Rochambeau is what he calls it, Ricky Starks.
Yeah, the Rochambeau.
Yeah, and he gets that for the win, so good for him keeping his momentum going. But I think it's fair to say that it was Wheeler Yuta's teammate or faction mate, Bryan Danielson, that was far more engaging on the night, and that was the next match. And it was finally the dream match to crown the greatest technical wrestler in modern wrestling history, and that is Bryan Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. Now, for this match, again, I didn't take as many notes on the actual in-ring action, but it was not because I felt this was a TV match. It was because I was just marveling at the technical exploits and the technical holds and all the mastery that these two were showing off in their field. And I actually noted down some points on commentary because I was just enjoying the action so much that the commentary was the things that really felt like the isolated moments stood out. And some of those I appreciate was Jon Moxley giving some really good insights into what kind of technical wrestlers they are, explaining that Zack Sabre Jr. is more of, he goes on the offense and deliberately tries to target certain limbs, and that Bryan Danielson's a bit more reactionary to whatever in the moment he needs to respond to, which I thought was interesting and a good way to actually separate the two, given they have been marketed extensively as the same type of wrestler. And there was even a moment where Jon Moxley was sort of bragging about the amount of pain that Bryan Danielson can withstand. And Nigel McGuinness had a great line where he goes, well, yeah, he's been married to Brie for 9 years. He didn't actually say Brie, he just said married for 9 years. But we all know who he's talking about. And quite frankly, from the outside looking in, that does look like it takes quite a bit of work. Aside from being just a stellar display of technical wrestling, the story was centered on Zack Sabre Jr. targeting Danielson's right arm, which is still quite fresh from injury. And Danielson didn't win with a technical wrestling hold, he won with a strike. And to specify, his running knee strike, which he had to hit 2 of to finally get the win. After the match, Bryan Danielson offered his hand, and Zack Sabre Jr. rolled out of the ring and walked away. So it feels very much like this isn't the last we've seen of these two together in the ring. And I say, what did you think of this match as a whole?
I think overall there was some really, really strong and velvety storytelling going on here. And part of it is exactly what Mox picked up on, right? It's the reactionary versus the offensive, right? It's almost like a Federer and Djokovic going at it, right? One's a super defensive, knows his stuff. The other one's a very creative, offensive, also knows his stuff. In the early goings, it was about the counters, right? Because these guys are both specialists. So when we're seeing things like the Indian Deathlock, the Kimura, the surfboard, the bow and arrow, the double crab lock, they both know how to escape the move. So it's almost like a stalemate constantly. And I thought that was some really, really interesting stuff to see that you can't get anything locked in for long enough to try to submit your opponent because your opponent knows how to escape it.
And they even referred to as like it's like they're like human versions of chess is what they were like describing, which I thought was a very good another good bit of commentary as well.
That's right. And I think therefore for that reason, when Brian Danielson rather started to transition towards the more strike-based offense, it makes sense because it seems okay, because we're at a stalemate here in our chess game, we have to go a little bit more war of attrition. So he pulled out the yes kicks. Zack Sabre Jr. did pull out the Michinoku driver and then the modified rings of Saturn. He knew how to pull out to get the torque in there, but just wasn't long enough to be able to get the submission going. Brian, he starts to stomp the head in, right? When he pulls the arms up and starts to smack the head against the mat. When we're seeing things like this, breaking out of a suplex, looking for the running knee, the story is really, really clean here. And the only thing you can think of is exactly what Mock said on commentary as well. One of the finest displays of technical wrestling that we've ever seen. We don't see a lot of this kind of technical style of wrestling much more. We see much more grapply, Western style sports entertainment, big spots, flips, more than just the fists. So it was an absolute treat to watch this.
Absolutely. And yeah, like I think you articulated it perfectly there.
And I think if someone watches it back, you'll notice very rarely do they need to go towards the ropes or to the corners. It's a lot of mat-based center of the ring offense. Certainly no posts, no weapons, no dives, no grappling, none of that. Locks, submissions, strikes.
All right. Well, I think it's fair to say the dream match certainly lived up to the hype, which was our big question from last week. Let's now go into the next match of the night, which was the six-man between Kenny Omega, Chris Jericho, and Kota Ibushi versus the Don Callis family of Konosuke Takeshita, Sammy Guevara, and Will Ospreay. Thanasi, any thoughts you wanted to bring on this match? And tell us.
Look, I don't want to dwell too much on this match, on this particular match. I think the point to make is that the story was indeed how much can the Alpha and the Omega coexist. As we saw on Collision, they proved that they can do so, even when you put the Golden Lovers in there in the form of Ibushi being Kenny's partner. They didn't manage to coexist. However, it was the right call for the benefit of the story to have that cohesion of the heels, and therefore getting the result that we did, which was who got the pin? Was it Takeshita getting the pin?
It was Guevara getting the pin.
Guevara getting the pin.
Yeah.
For that part of the story to develop Guevara as the up and coming wrestler, I really enjoyed that particular side of it. But beyond that, there's not really that much more that I want to say about this match.
Okay, well, there was a superior tag team match, not a six-man tag team match that followed, which was our semi-main for the night, and that was FTR versus Aussie Open for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. So actually, I don't know about you, this was the first time I've seen these two teams go at it. So, and do you want to let us know how it played out?
Well, for that exact reason, because it was also the first match that I've seen of these two go at it. Of course, it's not the first time that they have wrestled.
Of course.
The build to this match, though, for people like us, made it really, really good because they were presented. This is the Aussie Open here. They were presented as people who were celebrably a very big tag team. And the issue has been, can they keep up? So this was really good in order to make them credible opponents for FTR. And we did see in the early off, there were tandem corner post strikes up to 10. I saw that lovely avalanche back superplex by Cash. Fletcher hits a teardrop brainbuster. And then the Australians ended up hitting a midnight driver as well. And then we saw a superplex diving splash by FTR. which was broken up by a lateral press by Kyle Fletcher. So there was a lot of, in addition to the tag team wrestling, there was a lot of combination wrestling as well. There are elbow strike exchanges in tandem as well. We get to the Shatter Machine, not hit by FTR, Shatter Machine hit by Aussie Open, followed up by a Coriolis, one of their combination moves. And then the assisted pile driver on the apron by FTR is the response. That was massive, massive. So there's a lot of combined movement here. Yeah,
and that was hit on Mark Davis as well, who, just as a side note, he actually injured his wrist in this match. So he actually pulled together, but he still finished it, and, he did a good job,
And you know what it takes in order to get the finish of the match? It is a super Shatter Machine, an avalanche Shatter Machine delivered by FTR. Surely this must be it. It's a 1, it's a 2, it is a 3, it's over, which means that we will indeed be getting Young Bucks versus FTR 4. This was an excellent match, though. Aussie Open did prove that they can keep up, and they're great tag team wrestlers.
Absolutely. And I think with the super Shatter Machine, plus the fact Mark Davis competed for a portion of the match with an injured limb, I think these two showed that they are Aussie tough. So I think they did a good job, and I'm excited to actually see them go at it again and be a big mainstay in the tag team division for years to come, potentially in AEW. This now takes us into the main event, which I didn't think would be the main event. And honestly, I think it's fair to say that after Bryan Danielson came out, we started to think at this point, maybe, just maybe, the rumors were true. Am I right?
Yeah, I bet that was the moment. When you don't put Zack Sabre Jr. and Bryan Danielson in the main event, you have to have a very good reason. And they did have a very good reason. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, well, let's go into the match first. So notably, it was a 2 out of 3 falls match for the TNT Championship between Christian Cage and Darby Allin. And usually the heel will get the first fall, so that the babyface can come from behind and be heroic. But that's not what happened here. What happened was Darby, he actually he kind of blinded Christian Cage with his own turtleneck, pulling it up over his head, and then performed a sunset flip roll-up to get the first fall. So that got him that got him 1 up in the match. Christian Cage had to reply, and believe me, reply he did with some savagery. And this was chiefly using the steel steps, which he positioned out near the rampway. And what he did was brutal. He suplexed Darby Allin onto the steel steps, as if that wasn't enough. He brings him back up, and then he gives him a power slam. Sorry, not a power slam, a body slam again onto the steel steps. And this was, I said it before, it was brutal. And Christian Cage actually got this fall via countout. He didn't even need to roll him into the ring. He just left him lying there after the brutality of his moves. And as after that fall officially did get counted up all the way to 10, which equalized for Christian Cage, he then very bizarrely starts removing the ring apron and starts untying all the ropes, and he removes the protective foaming that thin layer they put over the floorboards of the ring to completely expose the said floorboards. And this was set up for the next part, which was the final part of the match. Notably, he actually splashed onto Darby while on a stretcher, which I was trying to bring him back to avoid and sort of finish the match right there and then, but Cage wasn't having any of it. During the match, he brings him back outside. He delivers his kill switch finisher on the exposed floorboard, but Darby kicked out. And this led to a next little sort of tete-a-tete of the two, where Darby was actually fighting back like the heroic personality they portray him as. He actually managed to deliver a Scorpion Death Drop, and he followed it up with his Coffin Drop, and that was for a very near fall. I'll be honest, I thought that was it. And then this was when things started to get really unfortunate for Darby Allin, because Christian Cage tried, when the ref was down, tried to use the TNT Championship to clock Darby Allin and get the win. But Nick Wayne ran out to make the save. And he gets the title. They go into the ring. He's side there. It looks like he's going to hit Christian Cage, but he turns around, instead clocks his friend Darby Allin. And this allows Christian Cage to get the 1, 2, 3. He wins the match 2-1 and retains the TNT Championship. Before we get into the afters, I just want to say a very good match, but it did make me feel really awkward at moments, particularly the events leading up to the second fall. Did you feel that way as well, Thanasu?
I think like a very easy fix could have been that they could have swapped the first and the second falls, because the first fall is just a very sneaky pin. You could have fit that in somewhere somewhere after Darby gets brutalized, right? Where like that's all the strength that he can muster. I think that would have been an easy detail just to swap around. But beyond that, without the show closer, this would have been an excellent pay-per-view match. It was like really, really up there, an emotional finish. If it had been there in the middle of the card, it would have been an excellent place for it. No issues at all. But that's my personal thought. I understand, though, for the following reason that you're going to come to, why it was in the main event instead.
That's right. Now, quickly post-match, Wayne starts beating down on Darby Allin, and Sting walks out to make the save on behalf of Darby Allin. And at this point, Luchasaurus gets involved, and this leads into a 3-on-1 beatdown on the Stinger. They set up for a concerto, which I was already suspecting something. When they went for that, the suspicions arose even higher. And then just as Christian Cage goes to deliver it, there's a blackout. A video plays on the Titantron of a wrestler or a person getting into a car driving towards the arena. And then the lights go back up. We don't know what's going on. And out of nowhere, we hear, "You think you know me?" And I've got to say, like, personal feelings aside, the crowd went electric for this. One of the biggest reactions I've heard. And quite frankly, this is a holy shit moment in wrestling. This will go down up there as one of the absolutely unexpected moments ever. And Edge, now I'm assuming going to be Adam Copeland, comes out. He feigns as if he's going to deliver the concerto, but instead he attacks Nick Wayne. He attacks Luchasaurus. He makes the save. He eyes his old friend, not current friend if you ask Christian Cage, but his old friend. And it looks like those two are going to set up for another encounter, potentially the final encounter of their careers very soon. Fancy, you felt very differently to this whole Edge stuff than I did. So I'm going to let you say, because I'm sure you are part of the majority, and I want to get the good feelings out there first. Go ahead.
So essentially, how can you not be happy to be seeing Edge in a massive, massive wrestling moment, right? This one's going to go down in history. He's in focus. It's got to be up there, not above, but it's got to be up there with his return in early 2020 at the Royal Rumble. Because anytime he's in focus, you know that he's going to be great. And I'm really looking forward to the kinds of matches this is going to be providing, because when he wrestled in WWE during his run, we did get the matches against Seth Rollins that we wanted to see. We did get a program against Finn Balor that we loved to see. This was fresh. But we also got an extended rivalry with Randy Orton. It was good for storyline purposes, but we've seen that before. There are a lot more new wrestlers for him to come up against. There are like Samoa Joes, there are MJFs, there are Adam Coles, a lot of fresh talent for him to have access to in AEW. And he's signed on full time, so he's going to be touring, he's going to be around a lot, and it's just going to be fresh. I'm really excited to see what more we can get.
Everyone brace yourselves, because this is when I become unpopular. I don't think I'm the only person that feels this way, but I just think, given Edge is one of the few lifers WWE has, I just really felt like it would have been beautiful if he did end his in-ring wrestling career completely there from the beginning of his stardom right to the end. To me, the only other wrestler that would make me feel really upset at such a move now is The Undertaker. And to me, that's what I mean when I say Edge, or even like someone like Randy Orton. Like, those guys that had just been there for so long, they'd been like from the beginning to the absolute peak of their abilities as a wrestler, just being in the one company. I just think it would have been nice if he ended it there and he didn't have this, however long it's going to be an AEW period to come. And I just want to quickly make a note of, in the media scrum, they opened with Adam Copeland, Edge, which they should have. And the thing that annoyed me, not necessarily in a big way, but no one bothered to ask two questions, which is, how long will this run last? Or even just more chiefly, do you see this as the final run of your in-ring wrestling career? And I wish someone would have asked that, because he made a big deal about how he felt like this was going to be his last year of wrestling. Recently, at his last WWE appearance, he made a note of he doesn't see himself having another year in him. And now he's gone to AEW, and he's saying he's going to be on a full-time gig, which to me, it doesn't sound like, you don't market a full-time gig if you're going to be around for 3 months. So it feels to me like he's got at least a year contract already signed, and AEW has a habit of renewing the vigor of wrestlers. So he could even go longer than the year. But it makes me feel a bit annoyed, because it was like he was saying, guys, I'm nearly there, I'm at the end of the road. And now it's like, oh, well, maybe not. So I kind of just wish that, just for the sake of keeping with the company that built him up and went through a lot of steps to protect him at best, and to also give him the moments that he really craved. And I think also, and first, I know that you have something you want to add. I'm just going to add this one final thought, and I'm going to throw to you, and then we're going to leave the Edge thing there, because it's a big deal. Regardless of my opinion, it's a huge deal, and it's probably good for the pro wrestling in general. In WWE, in this recent run, how many stars did he actually put over?
This is a rhetorical question, or this is an actual question?
I'm asking you, because, and I don't mean put over as in he gave them a spotlight and they became big. I mean literally, how many stars did he actually lose against as the final conclusion?
Well, he was a baby face, so he did it in circumstances where the heel was supposed to win.
There was only one heel or one wrestler that he always was unable to defeat in this recent run, and that was Roman Reigns. And for me, Roman Reigns was one guy that he didn't need Edge's victory to endorse him. I would have loved to have seen Edge actually lose to a guy like Austin Theory or Grayson Waller, like going out, and just to validate and say, this guy is next. Just like the time-old wrestling tradition of, give the young blood that victory over you because it means something. So I think, especially like if he knew he was leaving WWE, don't have your last match be against Sheamus, and at the very least, if it's going to be, let Sheamus get the win.
Two thoughts, and then we can move on. One, that logic that you're putting forward makes sense. Put Sheamus over if Sheamus were an up and coming wrestler. This was more just to tie off the loose end for them, and that's why Edge got the win. I agree with you in principle that yes, you're supposed to put over a young up and coming talent, someone who's going to become world champion on your way out. We didn't know he was on his way out though. We thought like things were up in the air. The other thing that I will say, on the point that you said about the press conference, I don't think any rational person would see him coming into AEW and immediately start asking questions of how long you're going to be around, because the implication is, when is this going to be over? And you're asking the question before it's even started. So I think that explains why they're asking more about the here and now, as opposed to essentially posing the question of when you're going to be leaving. But I think that's all we can leave that for that. We will hear more about him though on Dynamite.
Well, Thanasi, it's funny that you mentioned that, because Dynamite actually opened with Edge Adam Copeland now as part of the segment. So let's get straight into it. Dynamite obviously was celebrating its 4th year anniversary on this edition, and it started with Renee Paquette doing an interview segment with Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega, talking about the history that's passed and how 4 years ago those two were enemies and now they're allies fighting together. And they give their little spiel about how, yeah, it's so great. And then who should come into the frame but Adam Copeland? And he says, congratulations to Dynamite for its 4th-year anniversary. I plan to be here for the 8th and the 12th. Now, I'm going to discuss all the Adam Copeland stuff right at the end of the show because that's one of my main highlights. So I'll bring that back in the end. But now let's get into our first match for the night, which saw Rey Fenix successfully defend his AEW International Championship against Nick Jackson in what I thought was a pretty solid match. This was followed by, and this was quite amusing to me, because it was followed by an Adam Cole pre-recorded video with Roderick Strong and The Kingdom. But noticeably, and fancy, you can back me up on this, was the audio kind of stuffed up for that the first time?
The audio I think was okay, but the thing is they played the same clip twice during the show.
That's what I wanted to bring up. So it played once. I thought the audio, like, it was still kind of understandable, but it wasn't perfect. It wasn't crisp. And then we go to a squash match, as it turned out to be, which saw Griff Harrison wrestle the returning Wardlow, who we haven't seen since. Is it the title match he had with Luchasaurus in
Believe
June?
so. That's when he was written off.
Yeah, so he comes back, delivers 5 power bombs, and not a pin, referee stoppage. So this was quite a savage way to have a squash match, because he's a beast. He demolished the meat in the ring, and then he just ran out. And then I just wanted to note here at one point, Excalibur said on commentary, the rated R Super Shah instead of Superstar. So I think he too many S's in one go, kind of had a bit of a mistake.
He's probably just too excited.
Yeah, probably. Then we had Don Callis announce that Kyle Fletcher was replacing Sammy Guevara because I believe of some sort of niggle that he picked up in the match at WrestleDream. And then at this point, they replayed the Cole Strong video, and this time the audio was very crisp, very understandable. So I think there was a bit of a production error there. And then this was followed up by the match, AEW Trios Championship match between the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn versus Butcher and the Blade with Kip Sabian, which the Acclaimed obviously retained. We then had the Portrait of a Star with Tony Storm, and this was another amusing segment. Tony Storm made a big deal about how, I'm timeless. And as I was playing, I started to really get vibes of, this is eventually going to hit that Sunset Boulevard, I believe is what the movie's called. That moment, I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. I'm waiting for the moment she brings that out, which will be quite funny. And yeah.
Can I just say, and the bloke said it as well, she's not even old.
No,
right?
she's not.
She's only a couple years older than me. So like this whole timeless thing is the sort of thing you say when you are getting on in years. But that's just something I wanted to point out.
Oh, good. It was quite amusing. You agree, right?
Oh, certainly. She's doing fabulous.
We then had Bullet Club Gold without Jay White come out, and they had a bit of a promo exchange with MJF. MJF called the Guns the Arse Boys. He called Rock Hard Juice Robinson a talentless taint, which elicited a reply from Juice Robinson, which was, no, I have a rock hard taint. So some good entertainment value coming through with the Bullet Club Gold. They were essentially accusing MJF of orchestrating the attack on Jay White last week. MJF kind of rebuffed that by saying he credits and he claims all of his actions, including the misdeeds that he's done in his career. So why would he not just come out openly and say he did this one? MJF actually challenged Bullet Club Gold to a Stockton street fight. They were in Stockton, and they backed off, but then Jay White comes in, gives him a Blade Runner, takes the AEW title away from him, and then issues the challenge for Full Gear November 18th. And Thanasi, just right off the bat, I want to say, while the segment had its highs, it had its lows, the thing I love most about this is that we're giving 6 weeks of build for the AEW World Championship match. Like, once we get to Full Gear, it will have been cemented in place. that this is going on. It's not just something that's been haphazardly thrown about. And I really appreciate the fact that from now, I'm assuming at least, we know the main event of the next pay-per-view.
Well, that too, but also don't forget 6 weeks from now, but also last week is when it began in earnest, because that's when there was the segment backstage with Jay White getting assaulted. So it all starts, with that steady build. You got to give it a long time to go for it. And can I just say on that same point, this is where I like the whole storytelling and the sense making. Did you pick up on the fact that next week we're going to have Swerve Strickland versus Bryan Danielson for the TNT title #1 contendership? It means that wins and losses actually mean something because they both won at WrestleDream. So isn't that lovely?
Well, I mean, yes, it is. Obviously with Swerve, yes, okay, one win over Page, and now he's in the match for the #1 contendership. It's great. I'm actually curious to see where that goes, because I actually can't predict right now off the top of my head what they're going to do there. But now let's get back into the in-ring action. So we saw Jericho and Omega team up to face Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher of Aussie Open. And Omega took out the win in the end for his team with the one-winged angel on Kyle Fletcher. And it seemed that Don Callis on commentary had kind of disowned Fletcher, but that was okay because they already had another person in mind, and that was powerhouse Will Hobbs, who came out to the ring, obliterated Jericho and Omega, and they set up Kenny on the ropes, duct taping his arms onto the top rope to sort of leave him completely bare for any attack. And the duo of Will Hobbs and Takeshita held onto his arms from either side as Don Callis delivered a chair shot straight to the head of Kenny Omega. Now, on commentary, again, I don't want to bag on Excalibur all the time, but if I pick up something bad, pick up something really obscene, I want to bring it up. And in this case, he says, that shot, it's from an era of wrestling I hope never to see again. And I'm just sorry, but bare chair shots to the head mean nothing in AEW when you've got glass, when you've had barbed wire, when you bring out forks, when you bring out screwdrivers, you're pile driving each other's heads all the time on the mat. What? And you're telling me the chair shot is when we're going too far? Come on.
I think it's more just a comment on the idea of chair shots, because as you will have noticed if you look back, Callis didn't follow through with his stroke, like with the swing, right? So it means that even with the going for the chair shot at all, the instructions to the AEW staff were do it, but do it to the safest extent possible. We can say that it's not safe at all, but I mean, he just took one slight step. That's all.
Yeah, look, and my commentary is not on the danger of the way they performed it, because I agree with you. In this case, I think they handled it quite responsibly. But in a company in which they essentially allow the wrestlers to do whatever they want, and to then claim something's from an era that they hope never to see again, even though they're putting on, in my opinion, even worse things on sometimes a weekly basis, I just think it was a bit of a misguided comment.
Well, when was the last time there was a chair shot to the head?
I'm not talking about the chair shot specifically, though. I'm talking about all the violence and extreme levels of violence that they do show. For God's sake, we had a Texas death match a couple of weeks ago, and that wasn't the full extent of the savagery in which they can go into, but it's just that idea. Now, let's just go straight to what happened next. MJF was getting massaged by Max Caster.
That was amazing. Gold dust vibes right there.
I mean, I feel like I can't even add anything to it. I mean, it's just right there, isn't it? So I'll just move on. And there was a Samoa Joe video, and he says he's hungry for the AEW title, so he's definitely not done with that championship, which is quite exciting. Tony Storm beat Sky Blue in a match. And then this led into the main event segment, which saw Adam Copeland for the first time ever give his address the AEW crowd in ring. And he said multiple things. He gave 3 reasons for why he's there. 1, he wouldn't mind the world title. Number 2, all the fresh opponents and opportunities that are presented by the roster. And number 3, because his 9-year-old daughter, I believe, Lyric, said you should go and have fun with Uncle Jay, referencing Christian Cage. He then calls out his old friend and says to him essentially that I had to intervene. I had to intervene on Sunday because you guys were attacking Sting, a guy that we both loved, the guy that you got haircuts of when you were a kid. And he says, "Look, it's time for you and I to team together again." At this point, Christian Cage actually offered a hug to embrace his old friend. They did, but then, like the dastardly old dickhead he is, says, "Go F yourself."
He dropped an F-bomb.
And that was Dynamite. I just want to say with Edge, uh, I'm still very much in the mix of I don't know what the expectations or what's the lifeline of this, the timeline rather, because you know, not that long ago he was indicating he's probably only got a year in him. Now he's talking about wanting to be in AEW for their 8th, 12th anniversaries. Obviously, that doesn't mean as a wrestler, but I find it intriguing that he's been with the company for a grand total now of like 4 or 5 days, and he's talking about wanting to be with them in 8 years' time, which I know is just a comment. It's just a comment, but I just feel like, geez, like what's going
Look,
on there?
I don't think we need to give too much attention to specifically the word that he used, right? So 8th, 12th, whatever, it's all just it's a turn of phrase. I think that the people though that he named in his promo, John Moxley, Kenny Omega, Miro, Powerhouse Hobbs, Switchblade, Juice. These are like some really tantalizing matches, and some of them really can be done on weekly television as well, right? You don't need to build up to the pay-per-view level for Hobbs or for Juice, potentially even for Miro, right? The other three guys you would want them to be sold on pay-per-views. But then having Edge and Christian at some point going up against FTR and the Young Bucks, those are tantalizing matchups, and you can fit them into a couple years of just absolute Edge glory.
And the thing I noticed as well is that, with the exception of Mox and Omega, a lot of these guys have been Collision guys, and that makes me think that maybe they're going to try and utilize Edge on the Saturday show to sort of replace the star power that was left by CM Punk. And look, I just want to bring up the thing that I said it before, but I have reservations about Edge being in AEW just on the basis of the history he has with WWE. However, the thing that really excited me is the prospect of him and Christian Cage finally being able to tell that story with one another. Like, that was the one thing that I always said to myself, well, I can probably enjoy that 100% without any sort of filter in my mind. And seeing this, it just strengthens that possibility in my mind, that idea that this would be electric.
Edge and Christian taking on one another in a TLC match.
Are they allowed to call it TLC?
Well, they can call it whatever they want. I mean, TNA calls it Full Metal Mayhem. WWE calls it TLC. They can come up, I'm sure, with a creative name of ladders, chairs, and tables. Just change the order or something. CLT, like a CLT, I don't know, like a sandwich, make it sound like a sandwich.
With chicken instead of bacon.
Chicken, lettuce, and tomato. I could
Okay,
go
well,
for one of those.
Okay, well.
Anyway.
All right, well, let's now move on to WWE. And to start off with, and I think you want to take us through what happened on SmackDown?
Yes, well, SmackDown was an interesting show. There were a couple of good points, a couple of meh points. We opened up the show with the Bloodline promo, where Paulie calls Cena the second greatest of all time, and he gloats about the absence of Cena, the absence of AJ Styles, and then he nearly defecates himself when Jay gestures to receive the mic. First, Jay teases that, oh no, I'm just kidding with you, wise man, but then he actually grabs the mic, he seizes it, and before long, during Jay's taunting, yes.
Jimmy's, wasn't it?
Jimmy's, pardon me, yes. Carl Anderson makes the attack, and he says it's personal because now it's OC business. And when we return from commercial break, it's Anderson versus Jimmy, and the crowd I kind of felt was a little bit quiet. I don't know if they were let down by maybe it was a less than expected opening bout, but we saw stuff like the spine buster, super kick, Uso splash. These are the highlights of the match, and the final of those moves, the Uso splash, is what ended up getting the win for Uso. Anderson also eats a spike to close the post-match scuffle, and then Michin Mia Yim does end up giving Jimmy a big slap on his way back towards the stage. Next up, we had the Grayson Waller effect featuring one Bobby Lashley. Bobby said that he made a mistake thinking that the Street Profits had what it takes. And he says that they have to just prove themselves, basically. And because the segment seemingly ends prematurely, Waller sets up the entrance of his partner in A-Town Down, Austin Theory, who wrestles Cameron Grimes. And watching in the crowd is Dragon Lee from NXT. Looks like he's going to be getting his main roster promotion any day now. There's a diving crossbody by Grimes, a deadlift German also by Grimes, but Theory ends up winning the match via pinfall after the Waller distraction leads to A-Town Down. The first kind of marquee match of the night is for the US title, and it's Rey Mysterio versus Santos Escobar. There's a little bit of mat wrestling, a little bit of chain wrestling, signifying kind of deadlock between these guys. There's a story going on because they're so close. And in time, we get Rey's head scissors and a springboard attack, seated senton. Santos hits a super kick and a very, very long distance tope suicida. He had to cover a lot of ground. He also hits a moonsault off the barricade, running knees to Rey in the corner, a step up Insuguri, and a Frankensteiner. Lots of offense coming out. Santos also applies a gory special submission, a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker, a torture rack as well. And the boys both miss diving crossbodies. They exchange diving crossbodies that miss and hit the mat. Rey is struggling a little bit, but he tells Santos to just bring it on, come on. Rey hits an avalanche head scissors and looks to go for the 619, but his legs get caught at first, and Santos goes for the Alabama slam, but he succumbs to the head scissors and then 619 and the frog splash. Frog splash misses. So Santos looks for the Phantom Driver, but Rey ends up locking in a devastating inside cradle for a 1-2-3. And after this really, really good TV match, predictably, the Street Profits make the assault. And Bobby Lashley comes out looking very, very pleased with himself and with his proteges. There's an endorsement there. Next up on the card is Charlotte Flair versus Bayley. Charlotte initially on the mic taunts Bayley about playing second fiddle to Io Sky, and all this does is incenses Bayley. She even tells her to shut up and stop. Tells a fan to stop cheering for her because the fan was not booing her. He was just enjoying Bayley. But Charlotte ends up winning with a spear out of nowhere here. So Damage Control and Circle the Queen, and Asuka makes the save. Asuka blurts out some Japanese on the mic. Now, I don't speak Japanese. Bayley thinks she speaks Japanese because she says that she accepts the challenge for a triple threat at Fastlane. However, as we're about to close, we hear Io actually confirming that that's not what Asuka said. Asuka was not issuing a challenge. So maybe Bayley needs to study Japanese a little bit harder. But the main event of the night was not a match. It was a promo segment with John Cena. And he says having no partner is a problem for him, but he will refuse to give up. And he's going to honor the contract that he signed, even if it's a handicap match. And he does that thing where he raises his voice very loudly at the end of the sentence in order to evoke the crowd pop, even though he's not saying anything particularly special. But the Bloodline do end up coming out, and they remind him that they've been beating up people all night on SmackDown as a warning to not tag with Cena. So then they start pounding on him as well, and they want to put him through the announce table. So as Solo climbs up the turnbuckle, getting ready to hit his own splash that Jimmy wanted to hit, we hear LA Knight's music, and he heads down to the ring, delivers the neck breaker, delivers the people's elbow, but most importantly, he leaves his squiggle right on the dotted line, and he's going to be John Cena's partner at Fastlane. The crowd in California were so hot for LA Knight, just showing exactly the star power that we've got. And this is a good platform for him, right? Making him appear as the star, making the save, not the other way around. Dimitri, what did you reckon?
I think that LA Knight's going to show that in 2023, he's more relevant than John Cena. I think that's what.
He definitely is.
No,
That
but
goes without saying.
I think that's what's going to happen. And bold prediction just for a spot at Fastlane. I think the hot tags not necessarily going to be made to John Cena. They might be made to LA9. Yeah. All right, but now let's get onto the red side of things in WWE, which is WWE Monday Night Raw. Quick rundown of what happened on Raw this week. It started very frantically. So Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler, who was supposed to have a match to open the show, came out already brawling. At this point, Raquel Rodriguez ran out to get involved and get her revenge on Nia Jax. And then the women's world champion, Rhea Ripley, ran out to get her revenge on Nia Jax. Security had to separate all four of the women, with Ripley notably actually taking out the security that were in charge of, that were trying to restrain her. And this very smoothly transitions into Ripley calling out her Judgment Day faction mates to have a discussion based on what's happened the last few weeks in her absence. She reprimands Damian Priest for not managing the group's plans effectively in her absence and even allowing Finn to get injured last week, which was the explanation for why he wasn't on this week's Raw. She says that she's annoyed that Priest wasn't there to help Dom defend his title and argues that was part of the reason why he lost it to Trick Williams at NXT No Mercy. And then she reveals she's organized a match for Dom to regain the NXT North American Championship which was on NXT. Jey Uso comes out at this point and is beaten up by Dominic and JD McDonough before Cody Rhodes makes the save. Adam Pearce runs out and makes it official that there will be a tag team match between Cody and Jey with Judgment Day in the form of Priest and Balor for the WWE Undisputed Tag Team Championships. The first match of the night saw Giovanni Vinci and Ludwig Kaiser of Imperium defeat Alpha Academy, which is really good. Nice to see them actually succeed as a tag team for once. And after that, Bronson Reed wrestled Cedric Alexander, who hasn't been on TV for a long while now. And Bronson Reed actually beat him with his Tsunami Splash. Following that, we had a contract signing for the Intercontinental Championship match between Gunther and Tommaso Ciampa that was originally set for next week's Raw, but Ciampa goads Gunther into accepting the challenge for that evening. So that was the main event for the evening, which I'll get into a bit later. Then after that, we had Xavier Woods beat Ivar of the Viking Raiders with a small package pin, but Ivar beat up Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston post-match, so he still looks strong. Seth Rollins had an in-ring interview with Michael Cole, and he asked him why he's agreed to this match with Shinsuke Nakamura, and he said that he needs to leave it all in the ring, knowing at the very least that he gave it everything he had. So basically, he wants to be a fighting champion and give everything that he's got.
Can I just make a point on this one, Dimitri, that I think I would have preferred the role of a mid-card friend of Seth Rollins to have played the role of Michael Cole in this one, asking, what are you doing? Like, come on, you got to get to your senses. And then for that person to be the one that gets brutalized and then counted to 10 with Shinsuke Nakamura, both for sympathy, but also just to build some heat there. I think that would have been a nice little twist to have there to build that tension.
Potentially. I think the advantage you have with Cole is that he doesn't understand the addiction of wrestling in the ring. Because I think that also plays a part with a lot of these wrestlers, is that they don't care about getting their ass handed to them or getting injured, because they care more about being in there and entertaining not just the fans, but themselves, because that's their craft. So maybe from that angle, it's just having him be like a point of difference while still being relevant in WWE's sphere. That's why they used him. After that, and as you brought up, Nakamura actually launched a sneak attack on Rollins after that and countered his own version of a 10. So he's obviously implying that he's going to win at Fastlane. Following that, Tegan Nox beat Chelsea Green in a singles match and has seemingly gained an ally in the form of Natalia. And following that, there was a Drew McIntyre promo segment where he said that he's going to stop getting involved in fights that he didn't himself start or set in motion, saying that he's got to start looking out for himself a little bit more. Miz interrupts him and saying he's annoyed that Drew cancelled his Miz TV segment, which was scheduled for that week to have Drew McIntyre again, like last week. This time he says, "You're not Batman, you're Two-Face," playing both sides for whenever it benefits Drew the most, which I thought is far more apt comparison actually than Batman. And then this led into an impromptu match between the two, with Miz actually wearing his suit, no less, which Drew wins by exposing a turnbuckle, smashing Miz head first on it, and then hitting his Future Shock DDT. So he is a heel, but that was a very villainous thing for him to do. And then finally, this leads into the main event, and that was Gunther versus Tommaso Ciampa for the IC Championship. And this was a fantastic main event for Raw. Notably, Ciampa was targeting Gunther's right hand quite a lot, and he was getting his submission move in Sicilian stretch locked in at numerous times, and actually looking like he was very close to finally getting the victory over Gunther. But Gunther, like the dominant champion he's been, managed to get the victory after 2 power bombs and then putting Ciampa in a sleeper hold to knock him out, and that means he's retained his title. Afterwards, Vinci and Kaiser beat down on Ciampa, and this led to a big surprise return for me, and that was Johnny Gargano coming out, making the save for his former DIY tag partner, and it looks like those two are bringing the band back together. Vanessa, what did you think of this Raw and this main event?
Look, I've got a couple of thoughts, most of them positive, okay? The first thought is I side at the common trope of the expedited title match that WWE does a lot, where they say, "I'll see you next week." No, let's do it. Let's do it here tonight, right? That they forget the whole promotion thing, because essentially WWE knows that they're going to sell pay-per-views, but also they're going to sell just weekly shows in spite of themselves. They don't need to promote anything in advance. In any case, it was some great tense storytelling, especially during the Sicilian stretch spot. I thought that was awesome. And then that brutal finish that Gunther had in contrast, right? Where it's the super powerhouse of traditional wrestling, the power bomb, the sleeper. It's just simple moves, traditional moves that get him the win. But most importantly, how can we not be stoked with having Johnny wrestling back? It's going to be so good. We've been waiting for DIY to reunite for literally years. It's been like, we've just been waiting around for it. And with now the resurgence of DIY, with Imperium, with the Street Profits, the OC, Judgment Day, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, we've actually got a pretty nice little tag team division being set up, potentially ahead of the split of the tag titles back into the respective brands. Before we had McGriddle as well in the New Day and the Viking Raiders, but we've got a lot of tag teams coming around. So I'm really keen to see where this is going to go, and I would love to see DIY shoot to the top. Just one observation. We finished the show with a big return, a fantastic TV match, but it's a go-home show. And we closed the show with just no reference to either of the 2 Fastlane pay-per-views. They had to show the graphic of Fastlane to say, get the pay-per-view. And it just felt completely different at the close of the show compared with what we were seeing on our screens, because Johnny Wrestling and Tommaso Ciampa are not going to be at Fastlane. So that's just something that I just wanted to draw attention to. But that's it from me. Those are my big thoughts.
Well, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we're going to be reviewing WWE Fastlane. So be sure to tune in. There's plenty of action going on every week. And next week, we'll also get the chance to talk a lot about Edge and give even further information as to what's going on with him in AEW. So there's plenty to look out for. And Thanasi, great to have your company as always.
Thanks very much. We'll see everyone next week.
Yeah. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.